Yes, there's definitely some animosity through most of the film between both of them.
And maybe that was just kind of a bit of method acting, but from what I understand, kind of one of the regrets that Wes Anderson had on the film was it wasn't as fun to make as it should have been because of Hackman.
Do you want to kind of talk about each character, since this film, the film is pretty much character based? Like, once we've talked about each character, I feel like we've talked about the film in a sense. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, we don't need to walk through the plot, basically, but what the premise of the film is that there's this family, as you mentioned at the top of the show. The kids are all geniuses. There's even the book that Ethelene, Angelica Houston, the mother, writes about them, called Family of Geniuses. And unfortunately, in the years between, them being children and adult, the whole family just kind of comes apart. And everyone kind of has their downfall.
Mm-hmm.
And when the film starts, there's this very strained relationship between Royal and his children, and selfishly he looks to get back into their lives because he really has nowhere else to go. And he does that under the premise that he's dying and wants to kind of make amends with everyone before he dies. But as you know from watching the movie, that's not the case. He's not really dying. He just had nowhere else to go. He had no money. And he was just trying to get back into everyone's lives, hoping that someone would take him in.
He's also kind of offended that Ethelene is kind of really moving on with, a new boyfriend, who is Danny Glover's character. So he's kind of trying to weasel his way in between their relationship at the same time.
Yeah, and it states at the top of the film that they were never formally divorced.
Yeah, they're still married.
Yeah. Yeah, which at the beginning of the film we get this great narration from Alec Baldwin.
Oh yeah.
As the narrator, and what I like about the narration is he narrates the prologue. And he narrates the epilogue of the film, but really in between that, he only pops in very few times.
Yeah, like maybe every half an hour, if that.
Yeah. So it's not like there's a constant narration running through the film, which it doesn't need to be. He sets up the premise of the film in the beginning, and then kind of wraps everything up at the end. But he really only has a few times where he'll pop in on something. And then I love the beginning of the film showing the kid and the setup. I really like the fact that it's presented as a book, as a novel. Somebody checking it out from the library. It looks like someone checking it out from the library, which I believe that is Wes Anderson. That is checking the book out. I believe that's his hands.
And then that's the God's eye view, I think it's called. That shot that he's notorious for.
Yeah, and I just love that this is kind of the film version of that book, and I like that we should talk about the characters, but I love that every time they introduce a character, there's like a book that the character is associated with that they either wrote. Or like Margot with the plays. Mm-hmm. The only one that doesn't really have that is Chaz. Angelica Houston, Danny Glover, Luke Wilson, Owen Wilson, Gwyneth Paltrow. They all have a book. Bill Murray. They all have the book like associated with them. And I just love that when they introduce the characters, they show like the book that they've written, and there's like this kind of mosaic of a bunch of the same book.
Yeah, that's right. Ben Stiller's character doesn't have have one, huh?
Yeah, he's the only one that didn't have a book or some magazine article or something associated with him.
Because he was what did he do?
He was like playing the stock market, buying up real estate.
Ah, okay. Because Royal was stealing money from him as a kid, right?
Which is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Is when the grown-up Chaz, when Ben Stiller sues him, and there's a scene of them with the litigator, and he's talking about how he stole from him, and he says when I was a kid he stole savings bonds from me, and it
kind of switches over to Royal, and he goes ha ha ha.
Yeah, he doesn't have an answer for it. He just laughs because he knows he's caught. It's one of my favorite bits in the movie. But the beginning of the film sets up who these people were and who these kids were, and they were all special in some way. And it also shows the strained relationship that they had with them even when they were young, and that they had with Royal when they were young.
Mm-hmm.
And it's he's kind of distant from them already, and then he lets them know that he and Ethelene are divorcing. And then, he keeps popping up, and each time he's, like, just shittier and shittier of a dad to all of them. The only one that he seems to really like and get along with is Richie, who, grows up to be Luke Wilson.
Yeah, Richie is, he's like he gets into pro tennis, right?
Yeah, Richie plays pro tennis.
And he does he's very successful up until one of his, I guess, last bouts. He fucks up because I think he finds out that his stepsister Margot has married this other author, right? Who is Bill Murray's character, Raleigh St. Clair, right?
Yep.
Which is that's hinted at, but there's like this incestual type of thing that Richie has for Margot, or maybe you could say it's mutual, but they're not technically related, but it's still kind of taboo.
Yeah, but it sets it up in the very beginning, even when they were children.
Yeah.
That Margot and Richie had a close relationship, whether or not they were actual brother and sister. They always were tight and always had a bond,
mm-hmm.
because they ran away together when they were kids, and they were close. And all of Richie's drawings are always of Margot. And yes, his kind of downfall comes from Margot, marrying Raleigh and being with someone else, and him being very upset over that. And that scene of that tennis match is brutal to watch.
Then they're like, "Why is his shoe off?" What?
He has the shoes and like one sock off, and he's not even trying anymore. And they're like pointing out that he's crying. it's painful. So you wanted to go through the characters, so let's do that.
All right. Who do we talk about first? We've already talked about Royal a little bit. Richie.
Well, there's Ethelene, his wife, Angelica Houston, who writes the book about the kids being the family of geniuses. She's, after her divorce, she works as an archaeologist.
Yep.
She runs a bridge club with her business partner, who is Danny Glover, who's Henry Sherman, who is, I believe, the accountant. Also wrote a book on accounting, which is the book is shown when they introduce his character.
We've got Eli Cash as Owen Wilson, who we've talked about briefly already, but he's the kind of the neighbor who's always wanted to be a part of the family somehow, and even he grows up and he kind of randomly becomes successful, like a successful novelist, right?
Yeah, with his second novel, which is one of the jokes of the movie, is he wrote this first novel, which wasn't a success, but the second novel is kind of like getting some success. But he's still that hanger-on in the family. He's having an affair with Margot. He sends Etheline, like, all his clippings, and then you find out, like, even his grades when he was in school and in college, he would send to her, kind of looking for that mother figure, even though he had a family of his own.
And everybody thinks it's super weird, even when Margot finds out, like, she sees, I think, Etheline going through some of his clippings. She's like, did Eli send you that? And why? And Etheline is like, I don't know. I guess he just wanted to, like, impress me or something.
And when Margot asked him about that, he was like, oh, please don't belittle me.
Yeah, like, he knows he's been caught already. Oh, there's the great scene when they Royal catches Eli jumping out of their, like, one of the windows, Margot's window from the house, and he's like, what is this jerk off doing? And then he looks down and he's like, I know you, asshole. and Eli just looks up at him and, like, gives him a wave.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because just before that, Royal's smoking at the window.
Yeah.
And when he throws out the cigarette down to the ground, and when Eli jumps out the second story window, he comes down, he sees the cigarette, and he's the one that actually stamps it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny when he's at the window smoking. He looks out, and he's like, "What's this jackass doing?" There's Ben Stiller is the grown-up Chaz, and he's, as we said, he's the one that obviously has the most animosity towards Royal, and he has his family, his two sons, and unfortunately you learn that he lost his wife the year before in a plane crash.
Uh-huh.
Everyone else survived except the wife, so he's got this real depression and kind of obsession with safety,
mm-hmm.
and with not letting the kids out of his sight, and always trying to not necessarily baby them, but he's very, very protective of them.
It's Ari and Uzi, right?
Ari and Uzi, yeah.
And Buckley, I think, is the dog.
Buckley is the dog, a cute little beagle.
Oh, it's really funny how they're like, also the Buckley survived the plane crash as well. He was found several yards from the crash site in his
cage.
Yeah, in his cage.
His little his carrier. Yeah, and he survived the crash as well. It's unfortunate that only his wife Rachel was the one that died in the crash. There's
that weird conversation that happens with Royal and Ari and Uzi, Ben Stiller's sons, Chas, right?
Yes.
Chas's sons. Royal tells him the mother is brought up, and he's like, "Oh, I'm really sorry about her passing. She was a terribly attractive woman," or something, right? Something like some dog shit thing to say.
Yeah. He doesn't really. He's not really concerned, or he's not really empathetic, or sympathetic towards the loss of his wife. It's just more so he was just thinking about how she looked, and that's all he gave a shit about.
And you could tell he kind of strings that joke along throughout the film, because the wife and someone else is buried in the same cemetery.
Royal's mother, Helen.
Yes.
Are buried in the same cemetery, and Richie makes a comment that, Rachel is buried out there as well, and he's like, who? And Chaz says, my wife. And then even when they're at the cemetery,
he forgets flowers for Rachel.
Yeah, they just